What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me are my two great co-hosts, Fede Perez and Ralph Hannah. And guys, here we are. I think we're still riding the wave of, Paraguay's incredible World Cup qualifiers against Uruguay and Brazil. I think it's certainly a high that will probably stay that way for the next few weeks, but we still need to talk about what else has been going on in the country. Obviously, we have to see what's going on in the local league with the Clausura really coming into a big race as it really nears its end in about a couple months. Obviously, we can talk about what's been going on in the Sudamericana as one of our own. Libertad will be taking on Cruzeiro, the only Paraguayan team left in a continental competition this year. Let's see how they fancy their chances against the big powerhouses from Brazil. So, yeah, a lot to talk about. I think the first place I really wanted to start with first, as a little mention, I want to go to Fede first, is the Intermedia, because it seems like we're getting to the close of the season. I think it's going to be coming very, very shortly to a close, but it looks like two teams are really running away with it to become the two promoted teams. It's Atlético Temetari and Deportivo Recoleta, because, here we are really with the gap being a bit bigger than ever over the teams of Carapeguá, Encarnación, and San Lorenzo. But it looks like those two teams could be the ones to go into the first division next year.
Yeah, they've been pretty much blowing away from everyone else in Intermedia. These are teams that we'll probably see in first division next year. Hi, Roberto. Hi, Rob. Hi to everyone listening to Guarani Vision. Yeah, it is definitely something to talk about, right? As we head probably into the last chapters of the year, the last months of the year, and it is that kind of time in the different divisions of our football here in Paraguay where we see the teams going up, going down. As for the Intermedia, it's been pretty clear to everyone that Recoleta would be one of the teams that would go up, and Tembetarú has had a really second part of the tournament, second half, where they've just blown away from other opponents, especially Carapeguá, which was probably the other team that was putting up a fight. And then I would put in Encarnacion, who had a really good run, also trying to do something in their first time around. But for Recoleta, it was probably much learning from the experience. They had a very good chance last year to also be promoted, but it looks like this time around they'll make it happen. They do not have a stadium, which is something very weird. They play an artificial turf. I think we talked about this in other episodes. That's a very big advantage they've actually had these last couple of seasons around. I don't know where they're going to play in first division once they get promoted. I don't know where Tembetaril is going to play in first division because they don't have a stadium. They do have a project to build a brand new stadium. This is Ramon Sosa's club. If somebody out there wants to link that situation, one of the big stars that came out of this club, probably the biggest star lately. A very good season with a lot of experienced players, but with the project we've already seen coming through from third division. We're obviously going to be talking about more as the season comes to an end about these two teams, but we're definitely going to talk about the first division race. Roberto Ralph, this one's heating up, and we got the big ones. We got Olimpia, Cerro Porteño doing their thing, but so far it's been more Olimpia. Obviously, this Clausura, the Olimpia fans, the franjeados are the ones celebrating so far.
Yeah, and Ralph, I mean, obviously, before we get into that, we need to also talk about what's been going on in the women's game, because obviously we saw Libertad win the tournament in Paraguay, the local league, but also that in a couple of weeks we have the Copa Libertadores Femenina, and we'll have three teams participating in that competition. It'll be Olimpia, Guarani, and the champions Libertad. So, certainly it's also, keeping an eye of what's been going on, not just of what the men's game is doing, but also for the women's game as well.
Yeah, that's right. Hello, everybody watching, listening. It was a crazy end to the women's tournament. So Libertad and Olimpia basically blew away all the opposition. They were by far the two best teams, and it came down to the last day. They were tied on points, and it was basically a shootout to see who could get better goal difference. And if I remember correctly, Libertad won by 13 goals. I think 14-1. And Olimpia only won by 12 goals, 12-0, and Libertad were champions with a goal difference of 116. Olympia's 115 goal difference wasn't enough. So, I mean, that just shows, I think, at the moment, the huge gulf in quality of those two teams. Olympia's been up there for a while in women's football in Paraguay, and Libertad are maybe returning to where they had been in previous years. Going into the Copa Libertadores, then you would hope that being at home, Libertad and Olimpia have a bit of a chance. to be honest, Libertad's group looks much harder than Olympia's. So even though Olympia did come second, you might see them get through to the next round of the Libertadores. Whereas Guarani is their first time ever. So because I think Paraguay are hosting, they get that extra spot and Guarani are in through there. But like we were saying, there's a big golfing class between the two best teams, Olimpia, Libertad, and the rest of the league. So for Guarani, I think it's more a learning experience. And just for people that don't know, the women's Copa Libertadores is like a one-off tournament held in one place over, I think, about 10 days. It's not what we see in the men's game where everybody travels around and it goes on for several months, similar to Champions League in Europe. So this is going to be like a condensed tournament, and it all kicks off on October the 3rd.
Certainly one to keep an eye out for in the next coming weeks as we switch gears now to what's going on in the Clausura, because certainly we have seen a lot of change ever since we've, haven't really spoke about it with all the talk of the qualifiers and whatnot. But it looks as if, though, we're seeing a change, like you'd mentioned with the Franjeado, the Olimpia team is on form right now. They're doing well under Coach Martin Palermo. They're leading the league with 24 points in first place. And second is one team from Barrio, but it's not the one that you think of. It's Nacional. Nacional are actually in second place with 19. But I think we'll start off with the team that's kind of been really on the down, and that's Cerro Porteño. Cerro Porteño are currently in third place with 18 points. They lost their last game against Libertad, certainly in controversial circumstances as well. I'll go to Ralph on that first, because certainly we did see a game that, obviously saw some sending off, and I think even there it looked like Cerro Porteño might have looked at this game to say, like, this could be the one where they can really bounce back, but they haven't been able to, and now they're really trying to desperately get as much points as they could, because Olimpia, after that dramatic win against Sportivo Luqueño, the 4-3 win, it looks as if, though, they're running away with the title with, a couple games left in the season. But never say never. The league is still a long way to go, but I think for Cerro Porteño, it's got to get better than this, unless they really want to really just fail again and not win another title.
Yeah, that's right. I think for Cerro, coming into the game, for context, they had drawn at Trinidense or with Trinidense, and they'd lost the Guarani, whereas Olimpia hadn't been as all conquering, let's say, picking up so many points. So they were still in with a chance going into the Libertad game, knowing it would be difficult. I thought Cerro played really well. I thought they were actually the better team in that first half when it was 11 against 11. They kind of managed just to stop Libertad do what they wanted with the ball. I think it was Campuzano started that game with Caballero, and so that's quite a slow, or it's a static midfield. There's two players that are going to pass the ball, but they're not really ever going to be able to carry the ball. So Cerro looked comfortable. They were playing well. They got the lead through Delis Rodriguez, who's been one of the best players. I think that's been the big kind of positive for them this season, is that they managed to sign him from Taquari, and really has been a very good player. Cecilio Dominguez is back in the team after a long injury, so that was helping. And you kind of thought things weren't looking too bad. But then we get on the stroke of halftime, the first controversial decision, I would say, in the game, which is the sending off of Eduardo Brock, which is another player that he's just come back into the team because Manolo has changed his central defense a lot. And Brock, it seems like he slips, and he's not actually going for the ball. When he slips, he's like running towards the player to close him down, but not make a challenge. He slips, and that momentum carries in him, and he takes the player out. It's a yellow card on the pitch, and everybody thinks it might end there. But VAR came in, and VAR decided that the referee needed to look at it and change his decision. And so he gives a red card. That kind of changes the whole course of the game, because what they decide to do, Manolo, is bring on De Jesus at halftime, another central defender, to replace him, bringing off a midfielder. Whereas Garnero takes off Campuzano, and he puts on Ale Silva, who is much more of a ball carrier and can do much more going forward. And in fact, Alejandro Silva ends up getting the winner, set up by another sub, Marcelo Fernandez. Remember him from the Olympics. So that was the late winner. That came after a penalty, right, that Libertad had, which I think was a clear penalty. It was handball by by Cabañas. It's very close to him, but it's still a handball. So at that point, it was 1-0 when Alex Silva gets that really well taken winner. I mean, he does very well to manage to kind of hook the ball and make that second goal. And then I guess the third controversial decision is towards the end when Caballero does handle the ball in the box. Somebody's cut the ball back from Cerro, I can't remember who, but he's sliding in and he touches the ball with his hand. Usually that's not given as a red card, but as a penalty, because when you're using your hand on the floor to support yourself, that's rarely given as a penalty unless you're like directly blocking a shot, which he wasn't. So again, I don't think Cerro have much to complain about on that one. But the big controversy was the red card, right? Because that really did change the game. I thought Cerro were the better team. It was a yellow card on the pitch. Was it enough for VAR to get involved? Especially when you see anybody who watches the Premier League. I mean, it was the Jurriën Timber challenge in the North London derby was like very similar. He got the ball, but he went over onto the player, yellow card. They check VAR. And they keep it as a yellow. But in Paraguay, it became a red card and changed everything. I don't know what Fede thinks about that.
Yeah, I was at the game, right? And I actually saw Eduardo Brock, the Brazilian, kind of slipped first before the contact. But you can see it, watching the replay, watching the game, watching the same play again, that I believe the contact is there before he kind of starts to slip, and he gets him like very high up. So I think all those things come into consideration in VAR when they watch the play over maybe 20 times. You know how it is nowadays. They get that opportunity, but it's always, when the big teams are up there and they have so many fans by their side, it's so easy for them to say these kind of things, blame it on the refs, blame it on the VAR, blame it on the decisions, and not look into the match so much, and not see what you're doing wrong and what you're not being capable of doing or resolving in the games. And I think Cerro's been in those problems also, and they haven't been able to fix it. And Manolo has a lot to do with this situation, because of the decision making. So going into this game, it was that tie against Trinidad, which was a very weird one. Settle was winning, and they lost the lead at home. The team was being booed off the field, and the coach decided to blow a kiss to someone in the crowd. That wasn't well taken. Cerro fans have been kind of accumulating things during the year, during the season, and always running behind everyone. And now it's Olympia being up front, so they're feeling the pressure and they want the best of the team, and they're not seeing that lately. So again, going into this game, Coach Manolo Jimenez really had his back against the wall. So it's easy after Eduardo Brock being sent off, blame it on the refs, say we lost the game because of that situation. I believe Manolo has been doing things very wrong lately. Back to the preseason, back to a lot of fans point back at that situation. What did they do in Malaga? Did they really get ready for the competition? Because you're seeing that the coach is not being able to maintain a starting team, so he's changing it up all the time, every single game, even after they win in very well fashion. So it's really weird to see that from the coach, from his planning point aside, and to see certain players that you can see that are ready to be promoted and not be promoted, or not getting that starting role that I believe they deserve, like Ronaldo de Jesus, like Gabriel Aguayo. I don't know why these guys are not starting over Iturbe, over other players. And he's been waiting for the experienced players all along the whole year, and they haven't been able to produce constantly. So I think Cerro is just suffering that situation. A very poor decision from his coach, who is kind of wrapped up around several situations, and you're seeing Libertad kind of being stable again under Daniel Garnero. So this brings them back into the situation, back into the conversation. I believe this Clausura is very opened up. If Olimpia loses a couple of games, everyone's going to be tied up in points, Roberto. I'm really looking forward to the second part of the tournament, because this one went for Libertad. And who would have thought that it was going to be Alejandro Silva, former Olimpia, coming as a sub and scoring with his left foot?
And, I think certainly, is it really safe to say that Libertad are really down for this, that they are, going to have to just try to focus on the on the Sudamericana, or is there that big chance that Libertad could push a challenge just because the other teams are really falling, like Cerro or Nacional? Do you see it that way, or do you feel like now we still got a lot of time to go to think about that?
No, I think Libertad has a clear shot, especially under Daniel Garnero. This is the coach that has won it lately. You got to give him his respect, and he knows what he does with his players. The players know him very well, and he's even bringing up a couple of youngsters in games like this ones. I mean, he started with very young players, Lescano. He even brought up Matias Chavus, which is a player that we've barely seen play. I think this was his first or second game in first division. He's only 20 years old, and he brought him in when the game was hot, and he knows how to use Marcelo Fernandez, who, like Ralph said, was a very important sub coming in the second half. So the way he plans the games, the way he reads the game, he knows exactly what he's doing, Ralph. So I wouldn't count them out at all for the second half of the Clausura.
Yeah, I was just looking at the table. So there, I mean, we're at exactly the halfway stage. We're at the time of recording. Some teams still have to play, but the big guys have. And Libertad are 8 points behind. And you think, well, if they beat Olimpia, that becomes 5. Let's say Olimpia lose the Clásico and Libertad win their game, that becomes 2. I mean, that eight points can get eaten up very quickly, especially as I think we're going to talk about Olimpia now. It's a team that, although it's top, they're getting very close in a lot of games. And this the most recent one against Luqueño is just another example, but they're still only just winning games very often. So I mean, it's not like a foregone conclusion that even though Olimpia are 5 points clear at the moment, it might not stay that way towards the end of the season.
Yeah, and we'll mention Olimpia now because certainly, like I said, that dramatic 4-3 win against Luqueño, it was a big one. It was a classic, and I think Ralph, it certainly allows Martin Palermo's team to really focus on this big task of winning the Clausura because I think with the entire dominance that's been given to Libertad in recent times, I think Olimpia understand that it has been a disappointing year of them getting eliminated early in the Sudamericana. I think they really want to see this as kind of a redemption, especially after what the club has gone through so much in the last few years. And of course, the big task of trying to qualify for the Club World Cup. Again, that's a whole separate thing. But to get those two birds in one stone, I think would be a really good way to cap off 2024.
Yeah, and I mean, firstly, just thinking about this Olimpia game against Luqueño is a crazy 4-3 game where Olimpia were losing 2-0 very early on. Then they're 3-2 up. Luque come back into it, and then Olimpia get the late goal to win 4-3. And when you look at the starting lineup, you can kind of see maybe why this game became so attacking, because Palermo, I didn't really feel his teams were particularly attacking when he first started at Olimpia, but here he has Derlis Gonzalez back, so of course he wants to use him, and he was exceptional again. I think he got 1 goal and 2 assists. Yeah, 1 goal and 2 assists. And then Brian Montenegro has come back after a long injury layoff, and so he wanted to try and fit Montenegro into the team, but he also likes using Prato as the number 9. And then Redes has been on good form, so suddenly it's like this very attacking lineup, and maybe that caught Olimpia out early on, where they couldn't really think about how to defend because they had so many creative players in that lineup, and they're 2-0 down, I think, after 15 minutes. So it was a big shock. But then what you start to see is that attacking quality come through, and Derlis Gonzalez, we talked before about his level is one of the highest in terms of in Paraguayan football. And so when he's fully fit and when he's able to play, then he really is a different kind of player. And I think he showed that. And then Brian Montenegro gave us this reminder, right? I don't think he'd scored in over a year because he'd been injured for so long, or almost a year. But this is a guy that did play in West Ham, in Leeds United, in the reserves, in the championship. It is a player with a lot of quality. I think he's still only 31, 32. He's not that old, and he showed some of that class with 2 goals when it really mattered. Prato scores the other goal. So all of those attacking players we're talking about, they all contributed. Big change from Cerro that we're talking about, right? Where they can't really find the goals between all that attacking talent and Olimpia had. But the main thing I wanted to pick up on is since the Clásico, the draw with Cerro, they've won 4 games and lost 1. They lost to Nacional, but those 4 games they won was by 1 goal difference. So they really are just doing enough, which Could be the sign of champions, but it could be the sign of this isn't going to be sustainable in the second half.
Is it that fear, Fede? Is it that fear that maybe for Olympia they might get complacent and they might screw up in some games? Or do you feel like, like Ralph said, it's just the stuff with champions that they allowed them to get those results?
I still don't know yet. I'm still thinking about this team. I'm watching it game by game because, before the international break, I thought this game was flying high. I thought they were looking really well. They were scoring a lot of goals. They were unbeaten, and nobody was able to score on them. But that hasn't been the situation lately. The other teams scored really early on them. It happened with Nacional. It happened against Luqueño, 2 early goals, and they were up against the wall. They couldn't fix it against Nacional in a very tight stadium where they couldn't do it much. And Nacional took three very important points, which gives them the opportunity to keep fighting this Clausura also. But Olimpia bounced back in this game against Luqueño after a very rough start. I thought Luqueño really tried to outplay them in those first 20 minutes, and they were gifted with those 2 goals. I think this game actually had several goals because both defense are in really bad shape right now, especially Sportivo Luqueño's one, without the leadership of Aguilar back there, and you're seeing that they're struggling with Leguizamon, with Alexis Villalba, and Olimpia. How many times have we said this before during this Clausura? Gaston Oliveira has saved them so many times in so many games. He was the MVP in so many games before, even in the Super Clásico. So far they've been having tight games. It's always a nail biter with Olimpia in this Clausura, but the fans are loving it because they were not expecting the team to be in first place. They thought that it was going to be Libertad or Cerro Porteño, these 2 teams going up against each other, and they were just trying to get back everyone in shape, and they've done that. They've gotten the best version out of Derlis Gonzalez, like Ralph was mentioning. He's chipping in different games. I think he had 2 assists and 1 very important goal to win it. In this one against Luqueño, Lucas Prato led the way also, I believe, with his character and leading the team when it was 2 down and scoring that first goal. And Rodney Redes, again, he's performing pretty much in every game. I think he's found his place coming back to Paraguay, coming back to the country. I'm not convinced about Capasso and Barreto in defense. I'm going to say this again because I think Benitez needs to come back in that defense, but they found a solution with Brian Montenegro coming back. This is a place that they hadn't had someone with the experience like Brian Montenegro. So if he's back for this second part of the tournament, I think Olimpia is the number 1 candidate, guys, to take it.
Interesting. I think it's going to be a very close Clausura. I think, for a lot of these teams, they can't count victory or count defeat as of yet. It's still very early. We still got a lot of games to go, but it's always the nitty-gritty that makes it so special. So I'm certainly looking forward to it, and we'll have to wait and see what happens for the rest of the entire league as we close out to that and switch gears to what's going on this week as well, midweek with the Copa Sudamericana, because Libertad, obviously the only Paraguayan team after eliminating Deportivo Emiliano in the round of 16, they will be taking on Cruzeiro, a Cruzeiro side that defeated Boca Juniors on penalties. The first game is at the Defensores del Chaco. And Ralph, I mean, look, this has always been kind of the big, thorn in Garnetto's, life, essentially, in his career, trying to do so well in a continental competition. He's gone so close, and Libertad have gone so close in general, but they still have never made it to a final. Similar to what Cedro have done. They've been so close, yet they've never made it to a final as well. I think for Libertad's case, because of their economical, backing and whatnot, it should make it much more easier for them, but it's always hard to compete with the Brazilians and the Argentines. They get Cruzeiro, right now in that the Defensores this week. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens in that one, because obviously Cruzeiro are a team that's, right there in the middle of the Brasileirão. I think they're 7 last I checked. So they have been doing very well domestically with the manager Fernando Zebra. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what to expect from this one, really. I think Libertad really have a huge task ahead, but it's not impossible for them to try to get something into the semifinal. Reminder, they could play the winner of the game between Lanús and Independiente Medellin. So in theory, if they get past this kind of really tough tie, that helps them a lot in the semifinals, where I think they might be a bit more favored in that one. But first, they got to see what they do against the team from Belo Horizonte.
Yeah, that's right. The Brazilian sides are always the hardest teams at the moment, the way South American football is. We see it in Libertadores, and it's the same in Sudamericana because they have so much strength and depth. You're seeing like in the Brasileirão this year, like Corinthians could get relegated, and it's like Corinthians would, let's be honest, walk the Paraguayan league. They would have no problem. So it is a huge quality. But then we're coming down to just 2 games and 11 against 11. Anything can happen. I think for Garnero, this is a really big challenge because of what happened in the Copa America. So in the Copa America, really he got found out in tournament football that he couldn't make it work, right? In these one-off games, in these tactical moments, and he lost the Copa America in kind of 3 periods of 5 minutes more or less when Paraguay conceded the goals. Like against Colombia, they conceded twice in 5 minutes. In Brazil, I think 3 times in about 10 minutes, and Costa Rica twice in the first 5 minutes, which was even worse. But it was those little moments where he wasn't able to have set the team up right. And actually, it's interesting. We just talked about how they did against Cerro in the second half, of course, against 10 men, but he made good subs. They played much better in the second half. Paraguay were much better in the second halves of all those Copa America games as well, but it's not enough if you've already conceded so many goals. So it's a big challenge for him, I think, to say, okay, tactically, how am I going to take this on from the very start of the game, not just the last 45 minutes? And he has that thing, right? He has this wealth of talent, which we've just been talking about, and who to use, who not to use. Does Roque Santa Cruz come back in? Because he was playing a lot of Libertadores games with under Galliano. Do I go with Taquara, who's been the best, the best player for me in this kind of period where I've been coach? Do I stick with, I don't know, Marcelo Fernandez, because he's been playing really well, and we saw him in the Olympics, so he can do it in tournament football. So there's a lot of questions around that, about how he wants to set the team up. And knowing Garnero, he's not going to set up for a draw in this first game. He's gonna think, this is my chance to try and win. I was just looking at Libertad's record against Brazilian teams. It's not that bad in the Copa Sudamericana. 14 games, they've lost 6. So they've taken results in 8, 4 wins, 4 draws. That's not a terrible record. And most of that, by the way, has been Garnero, because if you think of the Sudamericana, they played it more, I think, under him than previous coaches, where they used to be more Libertadores. So, I mean, they definitely have a chance. They definitely have a chance. I think really the question is, how do they start the game? How do they start those 20 minutes? Because I'm confident they can end it quite well. But if they fall behind 1-0, 2-0 before they even got going, which we saw with Garnero's teams in the past, then the battle is going to be too hard for them.
Yeah, I have no idea how this team is not going to concede goals with the defense that they have right now. Going into this game with Diego Vieira and Nestor Jimenez playing as the fullbacks, I'm not liking that defense at all. I thought Miguel Jaquet was eventually going to come in here and solve the situation, because he didn't get the confidence from the other coach, and he's not getting that minutes, and he's not getting those minutes from Daniel Garnero either. He was almost brought into the game because Nestor Jimenez against Cerro was brought off with the red card almost when the game was over, but he wasn't able to come in because there was problems there with the refs. But he needs to solve that situation, especially in this series where the series is going to be decided in Brazil. So just like Ralph is saying, I think he's going to have to try to look into this game and try to get a couple of goals at least here, and take it to decide over there in Brazil. I'm hoping for big games from people like Ruben Lescano, who this is a player that has been growing and growing in that midfield. He's an attacking midfielder. Hopefully Ivan Franco also has a big game, but you never know what to expect from him. Sometimes he appears, sometimes he doesn't. And then there's a whole bunch of players that have been injured coming in and coming out of the team That's why you don't know really what team to put. I mean, if you thought you can think about, this is probably the best team that you can put for Libertad, but not everyone is fit right now. So Daniel Garnero really has the task ahead of him to try to put the best team out there against Cruzeiro. But I do think Marcelo Fernandez made the difference. Alejandro Silva came in very well. So some players are I believe in better shape right now. So it's going to come down to that. Good decisions, a good team, and hopefully very good results. My expectations are really high with this team these last couple of seasons because of the squad that they have. And I do think they are pretty much obligated to go through no matter what team they have in front of them. In Sudamericana, I expect them to get to the latter stages.
You expect that, but let's see if you can predict that. Fede, do you say that? Obviously, we got this game happening this week, and then next week when we do recap it, do you see Libertad doing it?
After what Garnero did in the Copa America, I'm not rooting for him in particular, but we are rooting for the Paraguayan team, obviously, because they are the only international team we have left between Libertadores and Sudamericana. So I'm going for Libertad. I'm going to root for them. And I think they're going to get through somehow, some way, maybe even in penalties, because I do think it could be that tie, that hard for them against a team like Cruzeiro. I think they're going to win it at home, but then the Cruzeiro is going to turn it back around, and I see penalties and Martin Silva maybe even coming through in that situation.
Martin Silva to be the hero. Ralph, do you agree?
Similar, yeah, I can see. So I was just looking at Garnero's record against the Brazilian teams. It's 1 win, 3 defeats at home, but the 1 win was in the quarterfinals against Santos 2021. So this is quarterfinals, maybe Cruzeiro of now and Santos 2021. Maybe I can see a couple of similarities. Yeah, I think we could see something similar with penalties. I could see them winning very tightly this home game and managing to get the draw away, because they'll actually do better in the away game if Cruzeiro are coming out to attack and there's more transition. I think that will actually suit Garnero more. So I can see them maybe sneaking through to the next round, but it's going to be by 1 goal difference maximum.
Okay. Wow. So that's a majority technically, because I'm going to say, you know what? Yeah, I think they're going to do it somehow. I think Libertad are going to somehow pull off a shock per se against the Brazilian team in Cruzeiro. I think it's going to be very tight. I think, similar to what Fede said, I think we're going to see a really disputed game in Asunción, and then, yeah, all the way to Cruzeiro, to Belo Horizonte, the Mineirão. I think that goes to penalties, and I think Martin Silva becomes the hero. So, yeah, all three in agreement that Libertad will go through to the Sudamericana semifinals, which would be a huge deal for them. And, yeah, putting them one step closer to a maiden Copa Sudamericana final, which, again, the game is going to be played in Asunción. That's a big deal. That would be a huge, big deal for a Paraguayan team to play there. Maybe not for Cerro, maybe not for Olimpia, for the fans. They don't want to see that, but yeah, I think for the Libertad fans, they'll love to be able to host a home Sudamericana final. So it's gonna be interesting to see. We'll obviously be talking about that. We'll talk about this game, this tie overall, what's going on in the Clausura as we close out another great episode of Guarani Vision. For myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hannah, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.